Hello and welcome to the Hands Up If You're Human podcast, an ongoing series of conversations dedicated to exploring and celebrating the messy reality of being human. The truth is, there is nothing we can think, do, feel, or experience that isn't 100% human. So it's time to drop the shame and the guilt, embrace everything that you are, and start creating a life you really want to live. My name is Wyndham. I am the Blueprint Coach, and I am delighted to be joined today by a guest who I think it's fair to say has lived a life. From history graduate to PR consultant in theatre, TV and film, responsible for bringing our awareness in the 90s to Oprah, Frasier and Friends. In the music industry, he represented Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, Steps, Billy Ocean, Atomic Kitten, The Who, Groove Armada and Meatloaf, amongst others. He was head of PR in the heyday of the Jamie Oliver empire before co-founding his own food PR agency, Berry and Green, before latterly, with a desire to create something real for the first time, turning his hand to authorship, and is now the successful author and publisher of The Deadly Dozen crime thrillers. It is my immense pleasure to welcome to the show Peter Berry. How are you, PB?
I'm good. I sound interesting thanks to that introduction, which I won't be.
I don't think it's down to the introduction. I think the introduction is down to the fact that you are interesting.
I'm just warning the viewers and listeners now that it will be less interesting than it sounds, but we'll do our best. But no, I'm good. I'm between books at the moment, so I'm not writing this month. It's I can't say which month we're doing this in because in case it goes out a different month, it probably will. But the last month I finished and submitted book 3 to the publisher, and with alarming speed they looked at it and said yes, that'll do. So excellent. Now I'm in the weird position of waiting for them to edit it and send back some red pen all over it, but that'll probably happen in a few months because they take a while. And then because I've got another idea in my head, I'll start writing another one in April, because once the ideas are in my head, they have to have some sort of channel through which they travel. So yeah, not writing in March, and I'm just reading other people's books in March. So it's a lovely chilled month. Sorry, I should have mentioned that I mentioned it was March.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. I'm pre-stacking a lot of these recordings, so
indeed
we're not particularly citing dates, but it makes no difference if we do.
Okay, so whichever month I'm in, I'm just reading at the moment. I'm reading lots and lots and lots of other people's very fine books.
Brilliant. So what's missing from that list? History graduate, PR consultant in TV and film, responsible in the 90s for bringing our awareness to Oprah, Friends and Frasier, music, PR consultant, all those bands I mentioned, head of PR at Jamie Oliver, co-founded your own food PR agency, and now an author. What is missing from that list?
Well, career-wise, nothing. I think you covered most things. I mean, there are a few celebrities that you could have thrown in, but there's certainly enough in there. I mean, importantly, the non-career stuff. I've never been a career person. All of the career highlights that you mentioned have been down to luck and just me being in the right place at the right time. So non-career wise, you're missing things like being married for almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years this October, which is something of a success in itself in this day and age. Being a father to 2 amazing daughters who are both over 18 now and doing incredibly well. In a very difficult environment for the young people at the moment. I do feel sorry for young people because it's tricky out there. And generally staying sane and being a good friend to as many people as I can be. That's the essence of, I suppose, what you're missing. Brilliant.
I particularly like, not that I'm dismissing the wife and kids, but I particularly like that being a good friend to as many people as you can be. I think it's a meaningful approach to life, or it feels that way to me.
Well, I think it's important. I think in not to plug the books too much, because this isn't about plugging the books, but
happy to do so though.
When I was pitching it to agents about 4 years ago, I was unsure at that point whether the first book was a love story with a crime thing going on, or a crime story with a love thing going on. And so there was a day when I actually sent an email to one agent saying, oh, it's a crime story with a love thing, and another, the next email I said, oh, it's a love story with a crime thing, and they both rejected me, which is quite right too. But after I'd finished writing it, and I kind of read it once, I've not read it since, but I realized it's neither of those things. It's actually about companionship, and it's actually about the basic human desire to be, whatever age we are, to be part of a gang and to be part of a community of people that you like and that you trust and that you can genuinely talk to about anything and everything. And I consider myself extremely fortunate in that I've got a wide circle of friends, lots of different blocks of friends. I've still got friends from school who meet up once every few months, and we try to chat about all sorts of things, and nothing's off limits. There are friends in the village here who are lovely and to hang out with. I've got various friends around the world who are kind of like, me and they are a kind of a friend unit, if you like. So, and I think it's important that when there are so many people, particularly in old age, who are bereft of that kind of companionship, I think it's very important to nurture those as much as you can. Would you agree?
100% I would, yeah. And I was just thinking as you were talking how easy it is for those really important connections to slip. It was only last year that I found myself in this kind of, I feel a bit down. I didn't really know why. And that's an ebb and flow of life sometimes. So I didn't really think too much about it. But it persisted and persisted and persisted. And it took me a while to realize I was lonely. Louise, I work from home. Louise is in London 3 days a week. But for 3 or 4 weeks, she was the only other person I really saw in real life. And it is so easy to let those things slip that actually making it a point to stay in touch, to stay connected and be a good friend and be there when people need you as well as when they don't is a really important focus. And especially I think for men. Now,
very much so.
I'm not a woman, so I don't know how easy or hard it is, but I'd hear Louisa on the phone to her friends way more frequently than she hears me on the phone to mine.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's a very male thing to say, we'll come around for a chat, and then you chat about football, you chat about the kids, you chat about work, and then you're done. And it's kind of, what else you talk about? Oh, well, nothing. What you watch on TV lately? That kind of thing. Yeah. But I'm lucky in that a lot of my friendships kind of go beyond that. They go deeper because a lot of them are so long. I've known the school guys since 1978. One of my best friends is a chap called Owen Bywater, who I sat in front of him in the first class at grammar school in September 1978. So that's 47 years, which is an insane amount of time. And he and I talk about literally everything. But to go into a slightly different but similar direction, and this is going to make me sound like a bit of a twat, and I do apologize for saying the word twat. But we've just celebrated, even though I can't say what month we're in, we've just sort of celebrated 5 years since COVID. One of the things that I did at the beginning of COVID was I went to I was meant to be going to have a lunch with my friend John Bennett, who's a Geordie, and we were meant to go to a place in Spitalfields, which is Chinese, for noodles. And when we got there, it was about the 14th of March. When we got there, it was closed, and there was a sign on the door saying, dear customers, owing to threats against our community, i.e. the Chinese, because at the time it was the China virus, and everyone was like, oh, yeah. Chinese people. We've had to close. We hope to see you soon. Lots of love. And so we ended up around the corner at a Vietnamese place, which was fine. Anyway, during this conversation with my friend John Bennett, I and he had this idea, because we knew lockdown was coming and there would be lots of people who would be at a loose end. And we had this idea of forming a temporary online friendship group based around music, because we're all, I'm a massive music fan. I play music every single day. And so when we all got locked down, it was actually the 17th. So today is the 5th anniversary, even though we're not saying what day it is. We're recording this on the 17th of March, everybody. Even though it goes out in May or June. I emailed a few 11 or so friends, acquaintances who I knew were into music. And in this email, I said, look, we're all stuck in our houses for a bit. We don't know how long it's going to last. Why don't we, just to break up the monotony, have a little group of people who, send each other, whatever they're listening to at the moment, or a song that means something to them. And the rules are, we'll do one a day, and people can comment back, and hopefully it'll be a nice friendly little group, and it'll be fine, and everyone will, it was all men. There was no reason for it to be all men. It just happened to be all men. So this group started up on the 18th of March, and initially it was just men sending each other music and going, that was good, that was, I didn't like that so much, but that was good, that kind of thing. But over time, and the more further we got into lockdown, probably around the end of April, beginning of May, it started to become something else. And it started with somebody emailing the group about the fact that they were struggling a bit and they were having a hard time, and various their parents were ill or something, that kind of thing. And it sort of morphed into much more of a therapy session, a kind of a group therapy session. And over 5 years, we've dealt with people's divorces, we've dealt with people's parents dying, we've dealt with people with depression, we've dealt with all kinds of stuff. And no one's really had a cross word to say about anybody. And it used to be every day, and now, of course, people are busy, and it's every quarter, every couple of months, that kind of thing, and it kind of just sparks up into life. But every time it sparks into life, everyone's so happy to reconnect again and deal with it. And it was just nice to have an outlet for men to be able to feel in a safe space to offload, if you like, because as you mentioned earlier, so many men find that difficult. So yeah, that was just one of the crazy things that occurred to me at the beginning of lockdown. And I'm sorry I didn't include you. I probably should have included you. And
no, don't worry.
I can include you, but you'll just have to be a late starter.
Yeah. Well, what I think is really interesting about that is it, as you said, it morphed at the point it needed to morph. And it was a group that was established enough that whoever that first person was who said, look, I'm struggling here, felt able to do so without anybody else having said it first. And then everybody else goes, oh yeah, shit, I'm struggling as well. And it's such an important part of male friendship, I think, for somebody to go first, because very often we don't. I look at different groups of my mates, and there's one particular group where it is classic piss taking. Male piss taking is the kind of level, and it very rarely tiptoes into the meaningful stuff in life, and that's fine. There's no judgment in that. That's how that group operates.
Yeah.
But I do wonder sometimes with the people in that group, who are they talking to about the difficult stuff? Because if they don't talk about it, it gets harder and harder and harder. And at some point, they're going to have to talk about it, even if it's in floods of tears on the doctor's surgery floor.
Well, you say that, but there are a lot of men, I think, who keep it in and insist on keeping it in. I heard from a friend that an elderly relative of theirs was suffering from depression, and was told by their GP to go and see a counselor about it, and they went twice. And when they were asked why they'd stopped going, they said, "Oh, it was a bit pointless. It's just me talking about myself."
Yeah.
I mean, as you and I both know, that's the entire point. For a certain generation, and not just generational, for a certain stratum of men who for whom talking about themselves is a completely unfamiliar land. That's just it's a step too far.
Yeah.
And I think I mean you'll know more than I, but I think it's important, particularly at the moment when, you know, but with young men, there's a problem of, you know, what does it mean to be a young man, and all, you know, all the Andrew Tate nonsense and all the,
Yeah.
you know, pressures on young male psyches. It's important to be able to tell people that they can open up in an emotional and you know, a far more open way. That sentence didn't make sense. If I'd
No,
written that sentence, I
that
would
would
have
be
scrubbed
edited.
it out, or certainly found better words.
Oh, but I know exactly what you mean, and in part, I think it is my resistance to that old way that has resulted in this podcast and the intro I say, which is there is nothing we can think, do, feel, or experience that isn't human. I think we've got to this weird place in society where we're trying, or we've been taught to essentially and effectively denounce the fact we're human and judge and feel guilt and shame about these things that are just inherent to the fact we are this kind of organism. So for me, the message for me now in almost all conversations is there's nothing to be judged. There's just stuff to explore. And if
Yeah,
we
no,
can be open to explore it, then we can find ways through it and resolve and all the rest of the good stuff.
I completely agree, and that goes to your finding your freedom thing, because I think that a lot of the things that stop people being free are self-created. I think that a lot of the time, particularly in your maybe 30s and 40s or earlier, you are giving yourself a hard time. You know, oh, if only I was thinner, I should stop eating cakes. Oh, if only I was more successful. Oh, if only I'd done this, then that would happen. Then we need to give ourselves some leeway, because, as you say, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all do things that perhaps, you know, maybe we shouldn't have eaten that giant piece of cake, but, you know, it was a giant piece of cake and I wanted it. You know, let's be a little easy on ourselves.
Yeah.
That way we can find our freedom.
Well, okay, so that is a lovely crafted segue there, PB. It's almost like you're a story arc teller. So let's start with that first question. You may have alluded to it to some respect there, but what does finding your freedom mean to you?
Well, I'm going to annoy people now, because I'm going to come at this question from a different angle, probably to the other people, because I watched lovely Chris and lovely Rosanna and lovely Connor, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but all of those people are in their 30s and 40s, I would guess, much like yourself.
I think they're all a bit older than me.
Okay.
I think.
But all right, early 50s then.
But they obviously do what they love, right?
Rosanna's a spring chicken.
Oh, well, yeah, that might be true. Yeah.
But I have to come at it from the other side, because again, I shall sicken viewers. I'm as free as I've ever been at the moment.
Brilliant.
Because I'll be 58 by the time this comes out in a few weeks' time. So I'm in what the business people would call Q4 of my life, where all of the things that I did in Q1, 2, and 3, if I've done them correctly, should all be kind of converging, so that I don't have the same issues that I would have done in 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that's not to say that I did anything particularly brilliantly or well, and it's certainly not to say that I've got any answers for those people that are still in Q2 and Q3. But I do feel freer than I've ever done before. My job, and I worked at those things which you mentioned at the beginning for 35 years, and that fortunately, plus a bit of luck, gave me enough money to sort of retire and start writing these books. And when I started writing the books, obviously I hoped that somebody would publish them. And once I'd found somebody to publish them, I hoped that somebody would actually like them. And the response to the books, particularly on Instagram, with the lovely book influencer people who I can't praise highly enough because they're so kind and so lovely. That's been joyful. Now, I'm not in the book business to make money. Most of the money that I make from the books goes to charity anyway. And I'm in the very fortunate position. I appreciate it's a very fortunate position. Don't throw fruit at me. To not need the money from the books. Oops, someone just fell over down upstairs. It's okay.
That's interesting as well, though, isn't it? Because there's a level of it sounds like you're coming at this from look, I understand how this might sound, but you've worked 35 years. I mean, I know a little bit about your previous careers or your previous career, and that is not an easy part-time kind of a career, right? So it's 35 years invested in getting to a point that you're at now.
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it was easy. Bit of it, but parts of it were easy. But a lot of it was seat of pants stuff, and as I say, a lot of it was also luck, and of course you make your own luck in this business. But if I was starting in PR now, I'd have a very different career to the one that I had. And even though I would happily have gone on for another 5-10 years, when it finished, when I sort of formally retired in October 2023, if you look back at all the things that you've listed and all the things that all the additional things that I could add to that list, if I went under a bus tomorrow, I could not complain. I don't know if you watch the BBC quiz show Pointless. I'm sure you do from time to time. But I'm always amazed at the jobs that people do on Pointless. They come on and they go, oh, what do you do? And they go, oh, I work in a shop. And they go, what do you do? Oh, I work in a bank. And the majority of the lovely people who are on Pointless, and they are lovely people, they do quite menial jobs. I couldn't do a menial job. I couldn't have done that. I would have gone slightly mad. I remember when I was at university, every holiday that I came back from university, my stepmother would always say, "Go out and get a job." So I went out and got to get a part-time job, and there was one job I did, which was in a factory that made bits of guns, and my job in this factory making bits of guns was I would put a piece of metal on a little plate, and I'd bring down a thing to make a hole in the piece of metal, and bring it up again, and then I put the piece of metal onto the thing, having put a hole in it, and I would do this constantly for 8 hours. And after about a week, I started a conversation with the bloke next to me, who I hadn't really spoken to before, and I said, "Oh, you enjoying this?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, you've been doing it for long?" And he said, "I've been doing it for 33 years. He's been in the same job for 33 years.
Yeah.
That would have driven me completely crazy. So when I look back on 35 years of mostly extremely interesting work with really amazing people and some fabulous global travel and just some bonkers experiences that one day would make a biography. I really can't complain, is what I'm saying to you.
So what that is a really, thinking of the other people I've spoken to, and certainly thinking of my life, that kind of getting into a career you don't enjoy is very common. So what was it about you that means at this point in your life? So this is a two-part question. What was it about you back then that meant you could navigate into those opportunities when luck and good fortune presented them to you? And then, because it sounds like you're not looking to create freedom, you've done that, and now you're exploring it and living it. So what was it back then that meant that happened for you?
The short answer is I haven't the faintest idea. So the overwhelming majority of my career was luck and being in the right place at the right time. So when I left university in 1988, I went for in those days, people who wanted to work in the media would go and buy the media. We'd buy the Guardian on a Monday, and there was a thing called Media Guardian, and that was the kind of section. And there'd be loads of jobs, and most of the jobs would be telesales jobs, which is, phoning up people trying to get them to advertise in your magazine or whatever. So I spent a month going to interviews for telesales jobs, and I would have been absolutely awful at telesales. In fact, I was so awful at these interviews that I joined an agency to send me to these interviews. And they were exasperated by my complete incompetence. So they sent me to a job at the Yellow Pages, which for younger viewers used to be a telephone directory of businesses, which was yellow. And it was just lots of adverts of businesses like plumbers and electricians and whatever. And they sent me off to an interview at this place in Surrey, and they said nobody has ever come back from Yellow Pages without a job. So it's a shoe-in. I was the first person to come back from the Yellow Pages interview to not get the job. So at that point, I was in a slight case of mild despair, because I really wanted to leave home, because I graduated and I didn't want to be living at home for any length of time. I just wanted my freedom. And a friend of mine from university said, "Why don't you try PR?" And I said, I don't know what PR is. And she explained it to me, and I said, "Well, that sounds quite fun." So I went to a place called the PRCA, which is the Public Relations Consultants Association, which I don't know if it's still there, but it was the association. It was the business, the kind of the business group for PR people. And I said, "Have you got?" There's a nice chap behind reception. I said, "I don't suppose you've got a list of PR consultancies I could write to?" And he said, "Yeah, here's one." So I went through this book, and I found 30 companies to whom I could write saying, "Hello, I'm a graduate, got a history degree. Do you fancy it?" So I wrote off 30 letters, and I got 5 responses. One of which was from a company called Paul Winner Consultants, and they said, "Thank you, Mr. Berry, for your lovely letter. Sadly, we have no vacancies at the moment, but if a vacancy does come up, we will of course be in touch." And that's the standard letter. But then the day after the letter arrived, I got a phone call from Paul Winner Consultants, and they said, "Someone's just resigned. Your letters were top of the pile. Would you like to come in for an interview?" I was like, "Yeah." This is where the luck comes in. So I went straight back to the PRCA, which is in Pimlico, as it was then anyway. And I said, "I've got an interview at the Paul Winner Consultants. Have you ever heard of them?" And they said, "No." And the bloke behind the desk said, "But I do know that Paul Winner has written a book on PR." So I said, "Have you got a copy?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got a copy. No one's read it, but I've got a copy." And they lent it to me. So I sat in a little park just off Sloane Street for 2 hours before my interview, and I read this book as far as I could, up to about chapter 10 or something, and went for this interview. And halfway through the interview, Paul Winner walked into the room, and I stood up and I said, "Oh, Mr. Winner, so nice to meet you. I've read your book." And he said, "Oh, have you? Oh, well, you're hired then." And that was that. And that was the beginning of my bonkers career. And then 2 years after that, that I was doing PR for mostly insurance companies and weird business to business stuff like that. But there was a woman who joined us who was a very glamorous sort of 40s woman called Liz Sweesey, I think. And she was with us for about a year, and then she went on to join another company. And I was sitting at my desk one day, and she phoned me up and she said, "Are you enjoying yourself at Paul Winner Consultants?" And I said, "It's all right, it's a job." And she said, "Well, I might have another job for you." And that was my first job in showbiz PR, because the business that she had gone to was a company that looked after celebrities and Channel 4 TV and stuff like that. And there was a chap who was working there called Laurie Bellew, who was one of the kind of like, doyens of showbiz PR. And he was the sort of chap who was very difficult to work with, allegedly. He'd gone through about 15 assistants in a year because they couldn't cope with his demands and his way of working. And this woman Liz thought that I might be the person who to kind of break the mold. So I went for this job interview, met Laurie, we got on pretty well, and rather than leave after 2 weeks or whatever, I stayed with him for 6 years. And that's when I started doing all the Channel 4 14 programs, and we did Ken Dodd for a bit, and we did James Stewart for a bit, and we did Michael Caine for a bit, and we did Jeremy Irons for a bit, and that was the beginning of the celebrity career.
Right. So, what was your approach? Because when you talk about this career you've had, the sense I get is you were primarily interested in like it being interesting and I'm going to say having fun. You haven't said that, but I get a sense that as you approached these opportunities, it was like, was there something you were weighing in the opportunity that prompted you to say, oh yeah, all right, that aligns with something? And the reason I ask is we have I think there's so many people out there saying you have to align to your values, or you have to do this, or you have to do the other, or this is how you make good decisions. And I'm fascinated by what those criteria were when a decision came up that said, yeah, all right, I'll do that.
I think partly it was money.
Right.
As long as they offer me a couple more quid, it was that would be fine. I mean, I went through most of the 90s. I was quite poor because PR, it doesn't pay a lot of money. If you want loads of money, you go into hedge funds or advertising or something like that. In fact, in about 1993 or 4, I was so sort of not poor, not not like living in a council house poor, but certainly there were debts piling up. So I actually got a second job working as an usher at the National Theatre, which I mentioned to you in my thing. And the nice thing about that was that's where I eventually met my wife, and so that was the good thing about that. But in terms of your question, I don't think so. There was never a career path. I know people have a career path, and it's always good to have a career path, because I think that if you want to get to the point that I am now, where you have found your freedom and you don't have any stress and you don't have any meetings and you don't really have any kind of anxious moments apart from the usual existential concerns about climate crisis and autocracies and wealth inequality and all that sort of stuff. It's always good to think ahead kind of 10, 20 years and work out where you want to be at that point, and then work backwards and figure out how to get there. I never really had a particular career plan, and certainly since probably the mid-90s, it's all been a question of just saying yes to stuff, which again makes me sound completely arrogant and twattish, which I try not to be. But the last time I actually had to do a CV was 1996, because that's the last time I actually applied for anything. I having spent 6 years with Laurie, I wasn't necessarily looking for the next challenge, but music had always been a massive part of my life, and I thought to myself, before I leave my 30s, I kind of want to do something in the music business. So I started to apply to various record companies to work in PR there, and music-based entertainment agencies. So I applied for a job in Music Week in summer of '96, and by some miracle got that job. And after that, every job since has been me being headhunted by insane people who thought that I might be able to improve their business in some way. So yeah, so my CV is 30 years old next year. So I should probably brush it up a bit, actually. Otherwise, I'll get thrown off LinkedIn. LinkedIn's email me once a week and say, you're on a roll on LinkedIn. I'm never on LinkedIn. I don't know how I'm on a roll on LinkedIn, but as long as they're happy.
Yeah. And how
just before you come on with the next thing, weirdly, when I was going through my impoverished state, and when I say impoverished, I was never skipping meals, but the problem was that I was spending most of my money on fags and booze, so that was the problem. But in my mid to late 20s, my one ambition was always to be able to afford fresh flowers. That was my thing. I would wake up in the morning and I would think, one day I'll be able to afford fresh flowers. And by the age of about 38, 39, I could afford fresh flowers. And in fact, if I turn the computer around, which I'm not going to, there are fresh flowers over there. And we've had fresh flowers in the house ever since we were married. I mean, it's a stupid ambition, but it's a small one.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's it was pointed out to me that I say it's interesting, isn't it? A lot. So I keep catching it in the forefront of my every time I was going to say it. That to me is a brilliant, beautiful ambition, because in some ways it's so small. In other ways it's massive. I want nature in my house. I want beauty in my environment. And it's it would be very easy to argue it's completely unnecessary.
Oh, totally.
But it's not, because you've had fresh flowers in your house for 30 years.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love that.
I mean, if I were a better person, I could use that money to give it to, give more and more to charity. But to be fair, I give quite a lot of money to charity anyway. So
there's definitely a balance in these things, I think, because you could live in a small, I don't know how big your house is, but you could live in a smaller house. You could downsize. We could all downsize our lives, if we really wanted to. And I think in the whole, I recorded a little video earlier today that I haven't posted, but the point is this experience. The point of our, that whole kind of find your purpose. What's the point of being a human? It is the experience of being a human being. It's not trying to elevate beyond it or bypass it. It is, what are the things that touch my heart and my soul?
Yeah.
Let's do more of that.
Absolutely. I've written a note, because I've written notes to prepare for this, and I've no idea where I got this from. It was either from my head or from TikTok or something. But as a person approaching or in the Q4 of their lives, I think that we are here on Earth for a shortish period of time, and certainly in galactic terms, it's fairly short. And our one job on this Earth is to leave it incrementally better than we arrived. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try to do at least one good turn every day. And sometimes I don't manage it, but quite often I do. And it's just those things that incrementally make other people's lives better. Case in point, 2 cases in point, actually 3 cases in point. We quite often have too much food for the number of people around this table, so we'll give a meal to the old lady next door who doesn't cook, and she's on her own because her husband died about 5 years ago. So when we can, we feed her. The other thing that we started to do at the beginning of lockdown, as you'll recall, it was the time when delivery drivers came into their own, and we were all getting things delivered. Virtually every day we were getting things delivered. And about 2-3 weeks in, we started giving delivery drivers little treats. We just, because you could go to the supermarket in those days. There was a queue, but you could go to the supermarket. Mm-hmm. So we would buy little chocolates or little fizzy drinks or something, so that when they came to the door with their packages or whatever, we said, "Do you want a Kit Kat? Do you want a Bounty? Do you want this?" And you'd be surprised how many of them were so overjoyed, particularly because we were probably amongst a handful of people who actually engaged in conversation with them. And we learned a lot of their first names, and we had little chats with them. Not always, because they had to rush off because they were on some sort of weird kind of rota. But we still know Tracy, our every lady. She comes around every kind of couple of weeks, and we'll have a little chat with her. And the third thing, just as an example of my little good turns for the day, one of our village friends, his son is a musician, and pretty good musician as well, and he releases songs on Spotify from time to time, and his debut single came out end of last year, autumn time maybe. And I was having a chat with my mate, and I'm talking about this music, and my mate said, "Oh, it's nice to have it on Spotify, but you know, one day I'd love to have vinyl." Now, in my head, that's like a little red rag, a little kind of like, oh, okay. So I immediately went and researched companies that make vinyl records, and I got 5 copies of this vinyl record pressed just for him, just to make him smile. That was the only reason for doing it.
Nice.
Actually, that's not true. There's a non-altruistic reason for it, because I kept 1 copy just in case he gets really, really famous and it'd be worth £1 million. So I'm not all good.
No, terrible human being.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing though is, like, when I set up this season, I was expecting to only speak to people who had to make a big change. Now that hasn't happened. I mean, big changes have happened, but I've had a couple of conversations with people where they had really enjoyed their first career. There came a point where it was time for something else. They're really enjoying what came next. Lots of people have had to go through some kind of fire. With someone who, from what you've said, has had a really interesting, rewarding life. You've worked hard and have benefited and are now enjoying the rewards of that through your writing in retirement. The thing that comes through for me is that you said yes to opportunities. So that often when I'm talking to people, and I definitely had it myself, there was a fear of saying yes to opportunity because you might fuck it up. That was my big fear. So you said yes, and evidently in the going about of your career and how you are with people, to get to a point where your CV is 30 years out of date says something. I'm not 100% sure what it says, but it says to me that people are undeniably engaging with you, PB, as opposed to the skills that are laid out on a document.
Yes. No, that's entirely true. But the thing is, with my chosen career, you have to be a nice person, and I'm not using the word nice as a kind of like, oh, nice. You have to be someone that people get on with, and because in all areas of business, as I'm sure you know, there are some right pillars, and there are in PR. I could name some, but they would sue me. I won't. But it's like in I mean, just trying to think. The nice thing about writing these books, apart from the small royalty checks that come once a quarter, is that anyone that's pissed me off in my career, I can put them in the books.
Are you doing a Chaucer?
As sort of, you know, unsavory characters. I don't use their full names, but certainly, you know, someone like Louisa would look at a surname of somebody who's a heroin addicted prostitute and go, aha. But I mean, all I tried to do for 35 years was I tried to do a good job, which is, you know, all you can do really. And I tried to be someone that was always there for either my clients or equally for the kind of media folk. Because when you're in PR, just in case people don't quite understand, I'm sure that your esteemed viewers do understand. But when you're in PR, particularly in celebrity PR, you are a conduit between the celebrity and the media. you're the person that's, because otherwise you'd end up with the Daily Mail phoning up Jamie Oliver on his personal phone, and that would be no good, because it would, Jamie Oliver would never write another book again, because he'd be on the Daily Mail, on the phone to the Daily Mail all the time. So we are a conduit. So you have to be, first of all, a diplomat, and second of all, you have to be able to roll with the punches, because there will be punches, and you have to be able to explain to your client why they are getting punched at that particular time and how to stop them getting punched. One of the first celebrity PRs I ever worked with was a chap called Theo Cowan. I worked with him between 1990 and 91, when he died at the end of 1991. He died at his desk after a nap, or during a nap, actually, after a very large lunch in Soho. And he always used to say, and this is something that he said to me 35 years ago, and it's still, I still remember it now. He said, a celebrity client is a human being slightly out of control. And I never forgot that, because when you are a celebrity, particularly of any sort of significance, you don't know what you're doing from one day to the next. You've got literally no idea, because your schedule's so crazy. You know, you could be waking up in a different city. You could be waking up in, you don't know where you're waking up. And the thing that, as lovely Louisa will, I'm sure, agree, the thing that Jamie Oliver used to say to me more than anything else was, what am I doing now? Because he really had no idea. I mean, obviously you'd send him a schedule, and his PA would send him a schedule, but he wouldn't remember it, because he's got 1,005 other things in his head. So you have to be the person to kind of maintain that control. If you like, you're the driver, changing gears and braking where necessary and accelerating where necessary, that kind of thing. And I've forgotten your question.
No, it was. Don't worry, because listening to you speak, it strikes me as, yes, your experiences in PR, and as an industry, it is a very specific industry. But the idea of being nice, like genuinely being a nice person who is as easy as possible to get on with, try as hard as you can to do a good job, be there for the people you are there to be there for, be diplomatic, and I've added, do things you're interested in. That, I think, could transpose to anybody in any area, especially as by doing all of those things, you've created the freedom you're now enjoying. So if nothing else comes out of this, and lots has, I think that is a really nice, short 5 points that go, actually, if you spend your life doing these things, the likelihood is good things are going to happen.
Yeah, towards the end of my time at Jamie Oliver, again, without going into specifics, because they'll sue me, there was a change of leadership, shall we say, and it was decided that they would bring in more kind of like half-yearly assessments of people, and the parameters of these half-yearly assessments were that they would get 5 random people with whom you worked to kind of like send an anonymous assessment of you, which your line manager would then kind of go through with you anonymously. Well, your line manager wasn't anonymous, but I remember one of these before, near the end of my Jamie Oliver term, one of these took place, and my line manager said, the thing that comes out most is that you need to be more ruthless. And I thought to myself, well, what do you mean by that? And the line manager said, well, you're too nice. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I've built up a career for 30 years not being particularly ruthless, and I don't particularly want to change now. So why the hell should I? So I sort of skipped over that bit. You know, I'm not going to be the sort of person that, you know, has a go at journalists for no reason. I think what they were saying was that, because there've been quite a few negative stories in the papers around that time, and I think that certain people had imagined that if I was more shouty, to the Times, to the Daily Mail, that those stories would stop, whereas in fact the opposite would be true. Because when you're in a situation where you're having to deal with the same people over and over again, because a lot of these journalists kind of stick around for a while, or certainly showbiz journalists or news journalists, they stick around for a while, or they move to somewhere else. So you'll find that there's somebody that was at the Evening Standard is now on the Daily Mail or Mail on Sunday or something. So and you need to build up that relationship, and they also need to trust you, because if you're a journalist and you're talking to a PR person and they say, oh, I can't comment, oh, I can't do this and I can't do this, and that's not true, the trust doesn't get built up. Whereas at least if you have the personal relationship where you kind of like very occasionally say, look, between us, yes, he has shagged a sheep, but it was only a small sheep. Don't put it in your paper. So I think, I mean, if I look back on 35 years, I've never done this actually. If I look back and I ever bothered to think, could I have done anything differently? The answer is probably not really. I mean, I don't have any regrets of. I mean, maybe towards the end of there were clients we had at the company that Chloe and I formed, who perhaps I might not have accepted as clients if I'd been wiser. But we all do daft things, don't we, in our 50s.
Very good. I'm conscious of our time, which is flying by.
I've not answered any of your questions.
No, I think one, I'm not sure, I don't know, but what you're saying is interesting, so it doesn't matter. And I think you have answered the questions. I think what you've just said is, for me anyway, is like, be who you are. I think certainly I suffered a lot early in my career with pretending to be the person I thought the other person in front of me wanted me to be. And essentially that I didn't care about that person. I would never have chosen them as a friend. And I was pretending to be somebody I wasn't in order to get a job I didn't even really want. And it was the most self-destructive pantomime. And what I'm hearing from you, and obviously that's influenced by my experiences, is I just kind of be who you are and they'll be all right. Which is a mass oversimplification, but
sometimes the simplest things are the best. Yes, I also think that you need to get to a point where you actually like yourself, both in business and in your personal life. Now, we all struggle, unless we are absurdly arrogant and narcissistic, which I don't think I am. We all struggle with liking ourselves. And I think you get to a point normally in your 40s, maybe slightly earlier in some cases, maybe slightly later in other cases, where life is life does weird things. So your 20s is weird. I don't think anybody should be legally allowed to get married before 25, because in your 20s you simply have no idea who you are. So your 20s should be used for experimentation, working out who the hell you are, particularly if you're a man, because your prefrontal cortex doesn't even form until the early 20s anyway. And then your 30s is kind of like that weird kind of time of what I want to do, building a career, maybe having kids, maybe not. Do I like my partner? Do I like them enough to marry them? Okay, yes, I do, that kind of thing. And then your 40s is just when you think you're getting sort of through the woods of all that stuff. You hit your 40s and you've got parents needing care, or parents maybe dying, getting sick. Maybe you've got kids who need help. You're kind of squished between this kind of generational kind of bench press type, not bench press, one of those things in woodwork, and maybe you're starting to kind of like creak a little bit, that kind of thing. and your career is a bit uncertain, and you're not sure, but you have to stay with your career because how are you going to get another job when you're 45? How is that going to happen because you're 45? So it's this totally weird time. But at the same time, and this certainly happened with me, probably around late 40s, 48, 49. You do sort of, in a lot of cases, I think, start to think, actually, I'm all right. I'm all right. And that's a kind of a key moment. I think that there are several reasons for why that can happen. A, you're obviously wiser. B, you've got that. A lot of the time, you as I mentioned earlier, you lose a parent or two, and that feels weird because it's like the best way I can describe that is years and years and years ago on Channel 4 there was a show called The Third Age with Mavis Nicholson, and she interviewed Maya Angelou, the writer and poet, and they were talking about the death of Maya Angelou's mother, and Maya Angelou famously said it felt like being at the edge of a cliff and you know you're not going to fall, but it's very windy. So if you lose a parent at that age, or at any age, in fact, but certainly when you get to 40s or 50s, you know that you're next in line and there's nothing that can stop you. So I think at that point, whenever that point comes, I think a lot of people have a kind of like a moment of realization. And if at that point you think to yourself, actually, I quite like myself, then that's a good place to be. And if you think to yourself, actually, I don't like myself, then you're more equipped at that age to be able to change things. I was reading an excellent book, by the way. I was rereading an excellent book. So for anybody who struggles with the dark months of winter, which I don't, but this is a very good book. Catherine May's Wintering, which is about the winter months, and I reread it over this winter. And towards the end of this book, she says, I'm going to read this line. She says, "Change happens all the time. The only thing we can control is how we react to it." And I think you get to a certain age where you realize that's the case, and you react accordingly.
Yeah, when you said when you get to a place in life where you look at you reflect on yourself and you go, actually, you know what, I'm okay. I like who I am, and that's a good place to be. Or you get to a place where you go, actually, I don't. I was thinking that's also a good place to be because you've had the realization. And then it is about what do I do about that? As you say, now that I'm older and more equipped to deal with it, what is it I need to address? And that is a beautiful quote.
Exactly. At which point are you liking yourself?
Most of the time.
Good.
Yeah, there's still little bits, but I think those are the elements of me as a human being that my upbringing and training and conditioning and all those kind of things would have me deny. So there's an inner dissonance around some of that, but I'm okay enough with myself to know or have a sense that that's what it is, in which case there's nothing I can do about it. I may, other than explore it and then get used to it. But yes, much more of the time now than it used to be.
And that's come with age.
That has come with age and a lot of reflection. So yeah, it's been the last 10 years. So 40, just before I was 40, it all kind of kicked into motion.
The other thing to mention is that you also get to a point when parents start to die off. And I'm not talking about my parents because my mother died when I was young and my father's still alive. I'm talking about parents of friends. Is you do get to a point again around late 50s, late 40s, early 50s, where you think to yourself, certainly in my case, you think, what can I leave behind? And obviously, great career, but I always wanted to leave something tangible behind, hence the books. So that's now a thing that will exist forever. So I can kind of pick them up and wave them around, and I can go, oh, I did this. This was this. I created this. I was always kind of like conscious of other people creating things, and me just helping them create things. Whereas what I really wanted to do was create things myself,
which you are now doing.
Which I'm now doing.
So very quickly, because ordinarily I have 3 questions, and I've only asked you 1. No, so the other question is,
I didn't know the answers to the other 2 questions, even if you asked them, I would be completely clueless.
I am going to ask this other question, which is, what is something you find yourself consistently having to create freedom from?
I'll be completely honest. There's nothing really. As I mentioned at the start, I feel that I am at my freest at the moment, both career-wise and personally, spiritually, if you like, emotionally. I mean, being sort of semi-retired is interesting, because I think with a lot of people, particularly those people who really like work, and I quite liked work, but I didn't kind of like, live to work. I always worked to live. But there are a lot of people that I know who, you mentioned the word retirement to them, and they kind of go, "Oh no, I get really bored. I couldn't possibly retire. Oh, I get really bored. What would I do all day?" And I'm always reminded of one of my English teachers at school, Arthur Westall, who's long dead, and he always used to say, "Only boring people get bored." Even if I live to be 500, I will never get bored. I haven't been bored for a moment since I stopped work 18 months ago, and the simple reason for that is that I love reading. I love music. I listen to music every day. It never bores me. And even if I live to be 500, I would still not listen to all the music that I want to listen to. I would still not be able to read all the books that I want to read. And the only thing that I ever get, not depressed, because I'm never depressed, but I ever get slightly miffed about is the fact that I simply won't get the time to do all those things, even if I live to be 500, which I won't, unless AI comes along and makes us all live to 500. So that doesn't answer your question at all. But
it does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So there's nothing really. I'm touching some wood, but I'm in a generally good place.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's interesting. It's funny because the whole premise of what I thought these conversations would be about would be that kind of unpicking the challenges and the career changes and the this, that, and the other, and then I have a conversation with you, and it's like, man, you know what? I'm pretty good. I'm enjoying what I do. I enjoyed what I used to do. I have time to do so I'm loving it, actually. And
well, as I say, if I ever sort of have a moment where I think to myself, "Oh, things are a bit crap," and something bad's happened, but bad things don't really happen. But I think to myself, I look out at the garden, which is lovely at the moment. There's a robin out there, and I think to myself, look, I haven't got to worry about money. The bills get paid. I'm warm. The heating's on. I haven't got to worry about somebody trying to bomb me, as a lot of people are. I haven't got to worry about somebody something flooding. So we live on a hill. I haven't got to worry about where my next meal is coming from, which a couple of billion people on this planet do. I haven't got to walk to go and get some water, for goodness sake. How blessed am I? I have nothing to complain about, so I don't.
Brilliant. That's a brilliant there's a little bow on the top. Thank you very much, PB.
Thank you.
So I know you weren't necessarily looking to promote your books, but this is an opportunity to do so. Where can people find your books? I will add links, but where can they find them? Where can they find you if they wanted to know a bit more about you, or wanted to talk to you about writing, or whatever it might be?
Well, I don't think anyone's going to want to know any more about me than they already know. But there you go. But if you have a bizarre desire to read the books, or indeed buy them for your parents' Christmas or birthdays, or just for the summer, the first one is that one, which is back to front.
Second one is
second one is that one. These are my copy. It says PB copy, just in case I decide to accidentally send it to somebody, and it's got scribbles all over it. The third one is coming out in September, hopefully, and yeah, they're on Amazon. I don't think you can buy many. There aren't many bookshops that you can buy. I don't think any, maybe, but Amazon's the place, and yeah, that's there isn't a website, just because I can't really be asked to do a website. But you know enough, you know.
Yeah, Amazon is fine.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm on Instagram. If anybody wants to contact me via Instagram, I think I'm at PB Scribbles. But you don't have to. It's not compulsory.
I'm not going to track you down. What the final question I very nearly forgot to ask. From your perspective and everything you've learned, what is something someone could do if they find themselves feeling lost, trapped, or in need of creating some freedom?
It's such a hard question. I have thought about this at some length, because everybody is different, and everybody, and you know, if you're in a crappy job and you're living in a council flat, then any bollocks that I say is going to be completely irrelevant to your life. The only thing that works for me, apart from obviously changing those things that you feel that you can't change, because you know you can change anything if you want to. The only thing that works for me is music. As I say, music has, since the age of 10, been a force for good in my life. I was playing some music before this interview. I should probably play some music afterwards. Yeah, apart from music, the only thing I would say is, as I mentioned earlier, don't be too hard on yourself. If you think something is not as it should be, either internally or externally, then do your best to change it, even if it's a small change. Small changes sometimes become big changes, and you always have the power to change things. But you can completely ignore me, because I don't know any more about it than you do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, PB. I really enjoyed it.
And for your time.
Everybody listening, please go and buy these books. I have to admit, I haven't read the second one yet, but I have read the first one. Thoroughly enjoyable. Bit of crime caper in London. Who doesn't love a bit of crime caper in London? So thank you very much, PB. Thank you for your time. Everybody listening, thank you so much. I would love to hear what you think of these conversations. You can get in touch with the show via email, is probably the best way. I always nearly give you my personal email. It's handsupifyou'rehuman@gmail.com. Please let us know. Please rate the show, review it, subscribe, share it with anyone you think who might benefit from it. Thank you so much for listening. I will leave you with that, I think. PB, any final words?
Now I'm just going to show you my T-shirt, which is a Banana Splits T-shirt.
Banana Splits. Back in the day when RTV only got Channel 4 1 minute in 6.
Yeah, exactly. But no, apart from that, just thank you for listening to the rambling. But it's always lovely to have a chat with you.
You too. And I think we're seeing each other quite soon. So
yeah. Well, obviously we can't mention when, because you know
timeline will all be messed up like Marvel's timeline. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, everybody. I will leave you to your day. Have a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.